Mary Roach, welcome back to Bullseye. It's nice to see you again, as always.
Aw, Jesse Thorn, thank you. Lovely to be here.
Were you just like staring at Elon Musk's hair one day and decided to write this book? I've whiled away many an hour gazing upon that marvel of modern science.
It's a very uniform and impressive hairline, if not entirely natural looking.
Was there an inciting incident?
Yeah, there were kind of two, because I had some stuff in a folder about religious relics, fingers and toes and stuff, because apparently there's some forensic relicologist who, when there's 5 big toes or something, has to come in and try to verify which ones are real. And I really wanted to write about that.
When you say which is real, you mean like which belongs to St. Peter, which actually belongs to St. Peter?
Yeah, which is a counterfeit toe and which is the real deal. And, they do this work. There's a lab in Oxford, and this guy is basically a forensic relicologist. And I got in touch with him, and he said, "Buzz off, I'm writing my own book." So I stuck it in a folder entitled Bits and Pieces. And I don't remember what else was in it, but I was toying with that idea. And then I thought, well, if I do something on bits and pieces, I'm going to have to deal with stem cells, which I don't really want to, but I'm going to have to. And I know this woman who works in she's a fat specialist. And I thought, oh, fat, as a substance, that could be interesting. So we got to talking. And over the course of the conversation, she said, I saw a paper by this surgeon who used a guy's middle finger to rebuild his penis after he had cancer. And I, of course, pictured kind of, the middle finger, which it was, the middle finger, kind of taken as is with the nail and everything just kind of sewed in place and operational so you could beckon. You could go hey, come here.
Yeah.
So that kind of, is it clinched it or cinched it for me? One of those two.
I don't know. I guess it depends how functional this finger penis is.
Well, I found out, in fact, that because the guy is in Tbilisi, Georgia, the country of Georgia, and he didn't write. I wrote to him in English, in Georgian, using Google Translate, so God knows what I said, and in Russian, and no reply. And so I called up this friend of mine who I do this to her all the time, hey, let's go to Tbilisi. And so we did. We went and we showed up because that's sometimes what I do is just show up. And the lovely lady in the office said, "Oh, Dr. Kuzanov is on vacation." And I'm like, "But we've come all the way from America." She's like, "You're a couple of idiots." But no, she didn't say that. She was actually very nice. And she said, "Well, we can go into his office and I can turn on his computer and there are photographs of the whole process, which I could tell you about if you want me to, or we talk about something else."
No, let's get into this. What you saw in the photograph was not a finger like my finger that I'm holding up to you, but attached to the mid-region.
Sadly, no. No, it was that is what I had in my head. It was an aspirational vision. But in fact, he used the guy's middle finger for the rigidity, and then he wrapped it in skin from a graft elsewhere on the guy's body. So I think maybe underneath of the forearm because it's not hairy, although there was hair. They'd had hair. She was like, yeah, he'll need to make lasers like ladies. And so it had some hair. It did have some hair, but it was very penis-like. And here's the amazing thing. We've, went through these images. The whole thing looked pretty realistic. But then there was this slide, and I think it was to demonstrate the strength of this penis where they'd kind of crooked the finger inside. It was bent up. It's a penis that bends halfway. And in order to show how strong it was, it had a ceramic water pitcher hanging from it. Like it was a hook on the wall where you'd put a hat or something. It was a ceramic pitcher. It was white with green and red flowers. Not full of water, they pointed out. Not that strong. Anyway.
It's good. It's good that they gave you that context.
I know they did. No, not full. I have that in the recording. It's not full. But he couldn't bend it at will. They had to kind of, like a Gumby limb, bend it up, bend it back down. Because that was a feature, so she said, so he can, wear pants and not appear to constantly have an erection. Kind of like bends out of the way, like a Murphy bed a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, when I stumble onto something like that, I'm like, okay, this is where we're going because this has to be in a book. So I'm going to have to build a book around this penis.
Let's talk about a different protrusion for a moment, which is, let's talk about noses.
Okay.
Noses have been getting chopped off for a variety of reasons for many, many years.
Low these many years. Yeah.
You're talking about duels. You're talking about syphilis. You're talking about simple
punishments.
Walking into windows accidents. Punishments.
Nasal mutilation. Yeah, it was a thing.
There are many reasons why someone would have not all of a nose where their nose otherwise would be. What historically are some of the ways that noses have been replaced?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm going to start with my favorite. It's not the oldest. We can go back in time to the older models, the older techniques. But my favorite is by this army surgeon, Frank Tetamore, in the early 1900s. It's a celluloid, so it's early plastic. Okay, early plastic is the nose. The nose is suspended from a pair of glasses. And to hide the borderline of the bottom of the nose, where it's hitting the upper lip, there's a mustache. So it's a medical Groucho Marx glasses.
Yeah, does it have big black eyebrows as well?
It doesn't. It's also not very useful for the female nasal mutilation patient. The mustache part, a little visually arresting, I would say.
But many false noses were created before modern plastics were available.
Yeah. Tycho Brahe, the astronomer, lost a chunk of his nose in a duel. He had a metal nose that stuck on with some sort of gum adhesive, and it was painted.
That he carried with him. He carried a little box of adhesive.
He did. That's a detail I really enjoyed, that he had a little, kind of like a snuff box, but it was adhesive for the nose. Some biographer claimed that it would drop off occasionally, and he would just pick it up and stick it back on, which you would do.
I like the idea of him carrying this around like a pitcher with a rosin bag. Just like...
Yeah, exactly. Just pop. Yeah. The metal ones, you had different shades of paint depending on the light, daylight versus cocktail bar light versus whatever. You could adjust the color of your nose to fit whatever the lighting situation. But weirdly, the earliest solution for missing a chunk of your nose was a plastic surgery technique. They would take a flap of skin from the forehead or the cheek, disconnect it on all on three sides, leave it attached in one part, and then flop it over onto the nose, let it grow in. You'd have to kind of like freshen the wound so that the body grows a blood supply in its new nose, and then eventually cut it free from where it used to be. And that is still occasionally done.
I mean, the material and the artisan class I was most surprised to read about with noses was potters.
Yeah.
Potters who created noses.
Yeah, in India, this caste of potters, I guess if you're good at forming shapes out of malleable material that you to clay, skin, what have you, it's like that's their thing.
Skin is a very tricky business and remains a very tricky business even in 2025. When people have skin injuries, like serious burns, for example, what are the kind of qualifications for what can be used to replace what has been damaged?
You can use someone else's skin. You can use pig skin, dog skin, frog skin, chicken skin. These have all been used. You can use whatever you want unless it comes from the person's own body, a patch of skin taken from elsewhere. It's just essentially a biodressing. It's not a transplant. When you have a really bad burn, your immune system is out of whack. So it kind of allows you to have, say, frog skin for a while, a couple weeks, and then it wakes up and goes, you know what, there's something weird about that skin and we don't want it. And it kind of sloughs off. But by that point, hopefully there's some healing that's gone on elsewhere in the body. You can take a patch of skin from the patient's own body, because ultimately that's what you want, because that's going to take and the body's not going to reject it. But there was a lot of, in the 1800s, early 1900s, a whole menagerie of animals were used. And ultimately, you didn't need to do that. Cadaver skin, good old cadaver skin, that is what is used most of the time still.
When you say a biodressing, what does that mean?
Like any other material you would use to put on a bad wound. It's a temporary cover that keeps moisture in, it keeps bacteria out. It's a dressing. It's a protective layer. And you could use, there's man-made stuff. Mepilex is like a foam, and it's sterile, and it's got multiple layers, and that works well, and it's cheap. Or you can pay for Icelandic cod skin, which gets touted as like the next greatest thing. But in fact, it's not, depending on who you ask, not really any better than cadaver skin. So it all of that works as a protective covering. It doesn't grow in and become new skin.
When you have a skin injury, the only skin that is going to, let's say, stick for more than a couple weeks while your immune system is suppressed by the burn damage is your own skin. But that skin has to come from somewhere else on your body.
Yes, it does. And that's why so often there is skin from someone else. Because if you have, say, an 80 or 90% burn, there's no skin to take. In cases like that, it's horrible because there's like a little bit of real estate left, and they'll take that, but then they wait for that skin to grow back, and then they harvest it again, and then so over and over. They're like, this one poor woman, I think it was like this one site, they'd taken skin from there 5 times over a course of the years. You can take a biopsy of someone's skin and send it off-site, and they'll grow a really thin layer of your own skin. It's pretty cool. There's also, this is TM, spray-on skin. There is spray-on skin, which is, again, it's taking some of the patient's cells and growing it out and then making a little aerosol thing to kind of get it going. They'll use a piece of cadaver skin that's been meshed so they can cover more terrain, and they kind of use the spray-on skin to fill the holes in the mesh. So that's kind of cool. And there's some company in Switzerland that's trying to grow full-thickness skin, which would be even better. But the cadavers are not going to be out of work anytime soon.
I mean, just the thought that you're using a cod skin or whatever it may be, cadaverous skin, to buy your own skin time to grow back in where it was removed to cover some part of the injury is a set of things I had never considered. And I don't know whether to find it inspiring or terrifying, although I could say that about much of the book.
Yeah, I try. I do try. But here's the thing with third-degree burns that I should say is, with a third-degree burn, the body normally like grows skin up from below, right? The regenerative cells are down below, and it comes in little bits here and there and fills in. But with a third-degree burn, those are wiped out, those regenerative cells. So the body is like, what do we do? And it tries to close the wound by drawing together, like drawstring pants, kind of like pulling together. And that's why burn survivors have these kind of disfiguring, because when the skin is pulling tight like that, it pulls. So you might have an eye that's pulled open and can't close, or, the chin is pulled down to the collarbone, that kind of thing. And then, so those have to be released. They just take a scalpel and cut down the middle and pull it apart. And then you got to take skin somewhere else and fill in the hole that you just created by releasing that pulling together. So it's this like years-long process. Don't get burned. Just don't do it.
I'll do my best, Mary.
Don't. Yeah.
Have you ever heard the expression going to Turkey?
I have not.
This is an expression that I wasn't familiar with until we posted a video clip on our Instagram of me talking to Jude Law. Jude Law is a man who is famously attractive and has a famous hairline.
I can't picture his hairline. Is it like back in the temples?
Back in the temples, but he has a sort of island front and center that connects via a sort of archipelago or isthmus to the back hair.
You know what that's called? I'm sorry to cut you off, but I feel the need to interject this term that I know and I'm very proud of. Ready?
Yes?
Persistent midfrontal forelock. I'm so excited right now. David Letterman had that. So anyway, get back to Jude. Yeah.
I asked him on the show, how he feels about it. And, he talked relatively frankly about it with me. And it was really interesting. We posted a video of it on our Instagram, and it went as viral as any clip we've ever posted on our Instagram, because it turns out people are obsessed with this idea. And one of the things that they are obsessed with is posting the comment, "Go to Turkey."
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, because that's where they do a lot of hair stuff.
So these are people who are rudely suggesting that Jude Law should travel to Turkey, where all the expertise in hair transplantation and so forth happens.
Affordable hair transplantation.
Indeed. I've chosen the most affordable hair transplantation technology of them all, which is to just cut your hair short and accept that sometimes someone will post a comment on one of your videos that you look like Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. But anyway, all these people were talking about going to Turkey. And I realized that when I was 16 years old and reading the San Francisco Chronicle sports section, hair transplant technology was this weird thing that lived in these like borderline classified ads and looked genuinely terrifying, even in those ads.
The plug era or the flap era?
I think this probably would have been flaps with plugs close at their heels. What is a plug relative to a flap? Let's get into these technologies.
Well, a flap is what it sounds like. It's a whole flap from, the sides and the back are where hair doesn't fall out. It's not sensitive to testosterone like the top. So you take a flap from the side and loosen it and then like rotate and flop it over and let it grow in on the top, in the front usually. And then the plug is like a whole, I think the early plugs might have had multiple follicles, right? And now it's one follicular unit at a time that gets transplanted. It's a lot of work.
Initially, the question as to both of these things was, would hair removed from the side of the head, for example, retain side of the head qualities, or would it, upon having been placed at the top of the head, become a hair that was just going to fall out like the other hairs already did?
The term that applies here is called donor dominance. And that is the place that you took the hair from, the hair will retain that lovely attribute of its homeland. So if you take it from the sides and the back and you put it on the top, it's like, no, we are hairs that don't fall out. So that works. And because of donor dominance, you can move hair around most anywhere, but there's some interesting side effects of that. Like you can, if you have pubic alopecia, which is a thing sometimes, you could take head hair, a follicle from the head, and you can put it in the pubic area, but you will need to trim it because it's going to grow like head hair. If you let it grow out, you would have, long pubic tresses. Similarly, you could take chest hair, armpit hair, pubic hair, and this has been done. You could put it on your head. The problem there, and I read a paper by a surgeon in Southern California who did a study on taking body hair and transplanting it to the head. He said the problem is that it is difficult to style.
You decided to do some experiential journalism with regard to donor dominance. What did you do?
Well, I was at this hair transplant clinic that works with this biotech startup that was trying to figure out a way to grow follicles from stem cells. So I agreed to donate some follicles for research, basic research. They need follicles. So I said, sure, you can take a dozen. I have a little tiny bald spot now right at the crown of the head. So I'm there and I said, I want to be able to show people, to demonstrate donor dominance. So can you take a head hair, that is follicles that are going to grow long, and can you transplant it to my calf? The idea being by the time I go out on book tour, I could roll up my pant leg and show people this long flowing hair on my lower leg. I thought that would, don't you think that made sense?
It would have been vivid.
Would have been. Sadly, it didn't take. The surgeon didn't think it would. He said the top of the head the head in general has a really robust blood supply, and the lower leg does not. I was pretty chagrined.
Were you surprised at the state of going to Turkey technology?
No, anytime there's something being done here, you can find it cheaper somewhere else. What surprised me is that in Turkey, apparently, this is still being done. This is illegal in the U.S., and that is synthetic hair transplants. It's basically like implanting doll hair using like this dermatological crochet hook where they're kind of looping it in. But it's doll hair. It's some man-made substance. Yeah, it's a little pluggy. They'd have to do them kind of far apart. Also, they're not going to go gray when you start to go gray, so that's weird. But the worst problem with synthetic hair transplantation is infections.
I mean, it's right next to your brain, literally, physically.
It is. You don't want to get an infection up there. Anyway, it was didn't seem like it was an attractive option. But this was the 70s in the U.S., and people were doing it.
One of the doctors that you talked to about why they came into the field of hair transplantation, one of the primary things they cited was artistry.
Yeah.
If you've ever met a surgeon, they're fond of their work. So I would imagine that's the case for all types of surgeons. But why is it of particular note for a hair transplantation specialist?
Yeah, I didn't expect this either. A hairline is irregular. It's not just like up and over, straight across. You want it to be kind of meandering and look natural. The term that this surgeon used was called snail trailing. And so he took great pride in that. And that caused him to diss Elon Musk's hairline a little bit.
One of the only technologies in your book that I have personal experience with is the iron lung.
Do tell.
I haven't been in an iron lung myself, but I've spent a lot of time with an iron lung because my father's best friend, Ed Roberts, was almost entirely paralyzed. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He could move one of his fingers, which he used to move his wheelchair around.
Oh, is he the guy in Berkeley, the guy who did the curb cuts and everything? He's amazing.
When he was in his chair, he would have a flexible, clear plastic tube that came up from his chair that would force air into his lungs. So he would talk a little bit and then he'd go. But when he was at the house, he would generally be in his iron lung.
Yeah.
So he'd be like cold and cord in his living room. He often worked from home in this enormous machine.
Yeah.
Like a giant MRI tube, like an old-fashioned MRI tube.
It's like an MRI tube. Yeah, it's like kind of a cross between a hot water heater and an MRI tube.
There's not a ton of folks who use that old-fashioned iron lung, but you wanted to get to know that machine.
Yeah. I did find one, and it was the occupant had recently passed away. I heard about it through this woman, Norma Brown, who's like a historian of negative pressure breathing, which is what an iron lung is. It's the opposite of that sipping tube that you talked about Ed using, which just is like a medical leaf blower. It's just sort of blowing through your mouth into your lungs, like kind of inflating a party balloon, and it's not a very pleasant thing. But the iron lung is a very natural way of, it kind of breathes the way we breathe. It pulls the air out of the lung, your rib cage expands, you draw in air, so it's very comfortable. So anyway, I wanted to experience that because you read memoirs of polio patients, they would describe the moment where they got to the hospital and they were put in this lung and this big tube with their arms inside and their head sticking out, which sounded to me like a living nightmare. Everyone described that moment as profound relief, almost euphoria, just so happy to suddenly be breathing. Like this machine breathes not just for you, but like you. And that was just weird to me. I wanted to experience that. Norma Brown, who's the historian of all things mechanical breathing, said, yeah, there's this woman in Kansas City who died recently, and she used to sleep in an iron lung. She had polio. She'd recovered enough to be able to spend the days like Ed in a wheelchair with a sip tube, just taking little hits of air. I asked her husband if I could, hello, you don't know me. I would like to come to Kansas City and spend the night in your iron lung. And he said yes. He said, sure. okay, whatever, sure. Sure, Mary Roach, you can come here. It's a really bizarre feeling of, it's like deep breaths. There's no effort on your part. This machine just makes you breathe, but you're not timing it. So if you try to talk, we talk on the exhale. We don't really think about it, but if you're trying to talk to somebody and the machine decides you're going to inhale, it just cuts you off. It's like, just like that. And it has to be a good tight seal around your neck. So you feel simultaneously really relaxed and you're breathing deeply, but also it feels like you're kind of being strangled. So it's kind of odd, but pretty cool that these were lifesavers, these machines.
All right, we got to talk for a second about super clean pigs.
Super clean pigs.
So in China, Confucianist philosophy and ideology can suppress the rates of organ donation because essentially one's body is a gift from one's lineage.
Yes.
And to donate organs could be interpreted as a desecration of one's lineage for that reason.
That is how it was explained to me exactly.
Organs got to come from somewhere. And, historically they have come from voluntary donation and let's say semi-voluntary donation of people on death row,
yes.
Among other places. But scientists are working extra hard in China for those cultural reasons on alternatives to cadaver organ transplants. What kind of alternatives are they working on?
They're doing something, and it's happening here too. They're looking at genetically editing pigs. If you took a pig heart and implanted it in a person as is, no genetic changes, the person's body would just go nuts on it. It's called hyperacute rejection, and it starts turning black, and it's just destroyed. So if you knock out this protein called the alpha-gal protein, that doesn't happen. You still have reactions similar to what you would have if you took another human organ and transplanted it. I think 9 months is about as long as somebody has lived with a pig organ, a kidney specifically. If they could perfect that, then imagine the number of people who would be saved. This is going on here in the U.S. There are 2 companies, eGenesis and United Therapeutics, both of whom said, no, we don't want you hanging around with the pigs, which is what I was just curious because the idea of a super clean pigsty appealed to me. But in China, they said, sure, you can come here and we'll show you the facility.
Something I might not otherwise have thought of about pig organ growing is that there are religious and cultural implications to the animal, the pig.
Yes.
Which is to say, they're considered to be unclean by certain cultures and religious groups. And the answer that this pig researcher gave to you about...
Who is Muslim, by the way.
Yeah. When someone writes him a letter to complain, like, how come you can't do this about a clean animal? What did he tell you?
He said, we're not eating them, we're saving lives. This was some paper where they had like the heads of, higher ups and muckety mucks in Islam, in Judaism. They got together and had to talk this out. Like, is it going to be okay? I think the fact that it's a super clean facility, these are super clean. Like these are sterile conditions. These pigs they are not dirty, these animals.
You talked to a surgeon who performs genital construction and reconstruction surgeries and specializes in gender confirmation surgeries.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you learned from talking to this dude was the ways that the relative lack of diversity in the plastic surgeon pool, the fact that most plastic surgeons are cisgender men,
yes,
affects plastic surgery for both transgender people and cis women. What did he tell you?
He sometimes has trans men, sometimes a man who's had cancer, who've come to him and said, this penis that was built for me, it's too big. It's just too big. I didn't ask for that. And it was this surgeon's opinion that it was the surgeon himself kind of patting himself on the back and going, oh, check out this one. This one's really big. And so they would come to this surgeon, who's at Cedars-Sinai Center for Transgender Surgery and Health. They come to him for a reduction. Also, with trans women, there's two different procedures. There's the vulva, which is the external bits, and then the internal, the vagina. And he's like, if you're going to have complications, it's likely to be the vagina. So if you're not interested, and some of them are not really interested in penetrative sex, whatever the reason is, it's like, then just do the vulva. And he said I would get surgeons coming up to me going, I can't believe you would deny a woman a vagina. And he's like, they wanted it that way. What do you mean? A little bit of projection, a little bit of cis assumptions there. Similar to how for years women who had mastectomy weren't not really presented with this option of going flat. They were just kind of shuttled off to the reconstructive surgery. And like nobody said, you don't have to do that. And there's a lot of procedures and complications and infections and things that might happen. It'd be a lot easier just to sew it up and be flat or use, prosthetics, external prosthetics. So
I was thrilled to read in your book the example of a multiple-time past guest on this show and pal of mine, Tig Notaro, who, when she had a mastectomy, did not have a reconstructive surgery afterwards, had no implants, and did a comedy set topless.
Yeah.
That's something that trans men comics I know have also done. And it's such a powerful expression that like people are allowed to have agency over their own bodies' expression in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so just kind of appalling because people trust their surgeon. I mean, it's hard to kind of stand up to a surgeon. You're a patient, you're vulnerable, you don't know what you should or shouldn't say. And so they have this kind of power. And people are not comfortable, I would imagine, saying, this is the size that I want, or I don't want it at all.
Did any of the experiences you had writing this book make you think differently about your own body?
Well, there was a guy who wrote a paper who tried to incorporate the Fibonacci sequence, kind of the golden ratio from Greek and Roman times, this ideal of physical perfection. And he liked to incorporate that when he was doing a Brazilian butt job. He's taking fat from one place, and, sometimes implants, sometimes not. And I was like...
He'd point to that poster that my math teacher had on the wall in 8th grade.
That's exactly right.
With the seashell and everything.
The seashell, yeah. He kind of would draw this sort of spot like the Nautilus shell on the butt, right? Well, now he's like, now I can eyeball it. I don't have to draw. I went there thinking he was going to draw and with the actual, get a protractor out and figure out the actual angles and add up the numbers. But, in the course of this field trip and this chapter, I read a number of papers on the ideal butt and also the history of buttock implants and the descriptions of quote unquote defects. Okay, the things, these horrible buttocks. That there's the one that I have is called the senile buttock, a little bit droopy, and the fold below that's only supposed to go a third of the way across. Should not be a fold. It should be a gentle valley. And I'm like, okay, I have the senile buttock. That's my defect.
Mary, every time you're on Bullseye, I find myself asking what is the most amusing medical paper or scientific paper that you read in the preparation of this book.
Yeah.
However, I don't think it would be possible for you to honestly name any paper other than How to Make a New Nose for Someone, which is off entirely and the dog has eaten it.
Yeah. I love that. That's only like 1500s. And on top of that, it's written in all caps.
2 colons. Colon, which is off entirely, colon, and a dog has eaten it.
I had to get that by the copy editor. She's like, I don't think there should be a colon here. Yes, he has 2 colons. Yeah. I love that. I love that he tried to put a little humor in his paper. Nobody does that now.
Well, Mary Roach, It is always a joy to get to read a new one of your books. It is always a joy to have you back on Bullseye. Thank you so much for your time, as always.
Oh, Jesse, it's the best. I love it. Thank you so much.